Lucy's Kitchen, it's Lucy's Kitchen. She's Lucy and she's got a kitchen. Lucy's Kitchen.
And now that we've got your attention, let's cook. Hi there. Welcome to Lucy's Kitchen. I'm Lucy, and this is my kitchen. Today, we're going to make baklava, the goddess of Greek pastry. Baklava is wonderful. It's so wonderful, as a matter of fact, that there are many countries that want to claim it as their own invention. But we Greeks know that that's impossible because archaeologists have recently found that, at least so I've heard, that the Trojan War was not fought over Helen, but over Helen's recipe for baklava. Today we're going to make baklava the Greek way. Walnuts. I have about a half a pound of walnuts, and I chop them up in my food processor until they're fairly fine. Now, there's a little bit of texture left, and that's good. But we don't want big chunks of walnuts because these are going to go between the layers along with some sugar and some cinnamon in order to, give us that flavor and that special baklava quality. The main thing about baklava is the syrup. So a lot of people are intimidated. They don't even want to taste baklava because they think, oh, it's all that heavy, honey. And it's not. It's actually a very light syrup that's made by boiling sugar and water, and then adding a cinnamon stick and a few whole cloves and lemon peel to the mixture. Now, lemon peel is very important. You can take a sharp knife and you can peel a little segment off the yellow part, and I love doing that, except, of course, quite often you'll end up with some of the white on there too. Well, if you have that dexterity, go for it. I also recommend you use a lemon zester. Just go ahead and peel off a bit. We can do a tablespoon or so of lemon peel, and then you just add it to this mixture, which we're going to do at the stove. Now, in addition, we're going to actually have lemon juice in there because that gives it some really nice, sweet, tangy, contrasting flavors. So the first thing we want to do is the syrup, because the syrup has to be really cold, definitely room temperature, before we pour it on the hot baklava as it comes out of the oven. Some people get it wrong. They get it backwards, where they pour the hot syrup on the cold baklava, or even the hot syrup on the hot baklava. But if you do that, your chances of making the baklava sort of gooey instead of crispy are higher. And so you want it to be crispy, and that's the secret to making it crispy. All right, those are our basics. The other thing is phyllo and butter, which I'll talk to you about when we get to that stage. But right now, let's go ahead and make our syrup. Join me over at the stove, and we'll make the syrup for Greek baklava. All right, we're going to add our sugar to the boiling water. We're going to stir them together until it runs clear. We want to make sure, I'll turn this up, we want to make sure that this dissolves perfectly before we start adding the rest of the ingredients. So I'm just going to stir this around a little bit. In fact, that's kind of hot. I'll use a bigger one. And it's very quick. So as soon as it's clear, and that's how you can tell, there we go, it's dissolved. So now to this mixture, I'm going to add the lemon juice. Then I'm going to add my cinnamon stick and lemon peel and cloves. Okay. We want this to boil with big loopy bubbles. And as soon as it does, we're going to just boil it for 12 minutes. So we're watching it come to a boil. No need to stir it once it's dissolved. Okay, I think we've got the bubbles we're looking for, and it's boiling mightily. So we're going to turn this all the way down to its lowest temperature, but it's going to keep boiling. We're going to boil it for 12 minutes exactly, and then we're going to come back and I'll show you what it's supposed to look like. So join me in 12 minutes. All right, it's almost ready. It's got nice, even, sort of largish bubbles. It's bubbling in a way that it looks thick. Now, it's not super thick, by the way. It's going to thicken up even more when it cools off. We'll take our spoon and then just kind of pour it off so it falls in a thin stream. It's not just coming out in droplets. Okay, we're done. I'm going to show you one more time. It's coming out in a thin stream, kind of almost stuck together, but not quite. Turn it off. Now, for that extra little bit of deliciousness, I am going to put a little bit of honey in our syrup. This is just about a tablespoon, and I'm only adding it here at the end. We're going to stir it in, let it dissolve, and it's just going to add that much more flavor. We don't need it, but it's delicious if you want to add it. So I'm adding this gorgeous honey. And if you have Greek honey, even better. I don't, however. Okay, so I'm going to just stir this now until the honey's dissolved. Now, join me back over at the counter and I'll show you how to work that phyllo. So before you actually start putting your baklava together, you need to make sure that everything's ready. You need to have your filling ready, you need to have your butter melted, you need to have your pan ready to go. Everything has to be ready because once you take the phyllo out of the package, you want to get going. So I'm going to mix together my ground walnuts, the sugar, which is only a tablespoon of sugar, and a teaspoon of cinnamon, and just a pinch of cloves. And I'm going to use my big spoon and just mix that up. That is our filling. Very simple. And we can push this other stuff aside. Now, phyllo. You want to make sure that the phyllo doesn't dry out. But phyllo doesn't dry out that fast. You know, you have to leave it out for a while before it really got too dry to use. So I'm going to unroll my first roll, which, yeah, there's the end. And one nice thing about phyllo is sometimes it comes in a piece of plastic that's actually the size of the phyllo. So if you're using your nice clean countertop, you can just unroll the phyllo right onto the counter and use this plastic wrap, which is, it's not sticky or anything, so it's great. And you can just cover the phyllo with the wrap. So, unroll it and unfold it, and that's it. Now, I love this phyllo because it is the exact size of my pan. So, if you have full sheet phyllo and you don't have the two packages, not a problem. You can just fold it twice, or you can cut it in half, either way. Another thing we do with phyllo to keep it from drying out, by the way, I forgot to mention this, is if you don't have a nice piece of plastic that you can put on top, you could lay a nice damp cloth over it. And sometimes they recommend putting the damp cloth over the piece of plastic. And then when you need it, you just pull it over. But we're going to work fairly quickly, so we're not going to need that damp cloth right now. Okay, start by taking some of the butter that you've melted for the baklava and just brush the bottom of your pan. And this gives a nice, coating of butter so that the bottom layer will be nice and crispy and hopefully won't stick. And as you see, I don't even have my phyllo covered. So here's another thing. We're going to make this phyllo, this baklava in 4 layers. So first we're going to have the bottom layer, then we're going to put some nuts, then we're going to have a middle layer, and then more nuts. Oh, so 5 layers. And then we're going to put the top layer. So we need to know approximately how many sheets we have. We're going to use half of it for the top layer, but we want to use this other half for the other layers. And so you're going to estimate. The most of it's going to go on the bottom. So we're going to start with that. And just lay it into your pan so that it lays evenly. And then just brush a little bit of butter. You don't have to overdo it. Simple as can be. And when you're brushing the butter, it's nice to go around the edges and then brush the middle. Oh, by the way, it's starting to tear. So when that happens, don't worry about it. Nobody can see it. It's inside the pastry. Just put it in there and don't worry about it. All right, now I am going to cover my phyllo. I'm going to brush a little butter. And now we've got all these nuts. I'm going to do about a third in this layer. And we're going to sprinkle them evenly. That's probably about right. Doesn't have to be exact. Okay. So shake it a little bit to kind of make it go even. Uh-oh. Use your fingers if you have to. And that's it. Back to our phyllo. Now this is a trick my mother taught me, is to have multiple layers of the filling rather than put all the filling in the middle, because that helps the layers kind of stay in place. If you put them all in the middle, you'll end up with, you know, a pastry that maybe will just open up in half, and you know, you don't really want that. So a couple of layers of phyllo. In between. One more. Now we'll go ahead and do another third. And a few more layers. Whoops, that's another torn one. But it's okay. All right. That's our first half. And we end this half with the rest of our nuts. All right, we're halfway done. All right, to recap, we are doing several layers of phyllo with nuts in small amounts, the nuts in small amounts, so that this will all kind of be cohesive after we bake it. I've got my other whole half of the pound of phyllo. And where's that opening? There it is. Okay. And this time I'm going to use the other piece of plastic underneath. So believe it or not, we're going to use this entire half pound on top. And what we want to do is make sure that the top layers are the nicest. So about halfway through, hopefully, I'll remember to flip this pile of phyllo over. All right, so we'll go back and we'll do exactly what we're doing before. This time we're going to be a little bit more generous with our butter, especially when we get to the top 10 layers. So I'm just dotting the butter. When it's on top of the nuts, sometimes the sheet slides around a little. So if you just dot the butter, that's good until you get a nice surface by using several sheets of phyllo. See, nothing happened. But to be calm and know that the phyllo is safe, go ahead and cover it up. Okay, moment of truth. Here we go. I don't think we're going to do it. Okay, so close enough. Forget all that talk about having it be perfect. Put one layer here. And the other layer like this here. Okay. All right, press it down a little bit. Now take a lot of butter and brush the top layer. Okay. And I'm going to take my knife and just press it down on the edges so that it forms kind of a little edge crust. All right, and a very important step before we put our baklava in the oven is to score it. We're going to cut through it in the shapes of the slices after it bakes. Now, why do we do this? Well, we do it for a number of reasons. First of all, if you pre-score it before you bake it, it's very easy to cut it through and serve without pastry flying all over. The second is our syrup. You may remember we're cooling off our syrup, and after it bakes, we're going to pour this cold syrup over the hot baklava, and it's going to go right down into the cuts and soak all the way through the pastry. So it's going to be delicious. And the best way to do this is to maybe start by quartering your pan. So I'm going to cut right in the middle. Now we're not cutting all the way down. We're basically chopping through the pastry and the filling enough so it goes down through most of the layers. We're going to finish it later. All right. Now if you had a measuring utensil, you could measure this to make sure it was perfectly quartered. But as you see, I don't, and I don't care. So we're going to love it no matter what. And I'm going to flip that around, whee, and do that. Now, why do I flip it around? Well, because as you get toward the edges, it starts to raise up. And so when you're cutting through baklava or phyllo in general, it helps to kind of go halfway and then turn it and do the other half. So that's what we're doing. Okay, at this point, we could cut it into squares, or we could do it the way the Greeks do it, which is to cut it sort of into diamond shapes. And in order to cut it into diamond shapes, you want to take these perpendicular lines and cut sort of on an angle. So that's what we'll do, and we'll start. Let's see, I think I'll start at one end. That will set our shape. And turn it around and follow that line all the way across. Okay, we're going to do the same thing from this corner. And look at that beautiful diamond shape. Now we'll just continue estimating the approximate width. Do it this way. Okay. Now some of these pieces are really big. That means someone's going to get a nice piece when they get this served to them for dessert. We've got tons of pieces here, probably at least 2 dozen, maybe 3 dozen, plenty for a party. The nice thing about baklava is that even if you have tons left over, you can wrap it in foil, you can put it in the freezer, it'll keep for quite a while, and then you can just take it out, unwrap it, let it come to room temperature and serve it. It'll be just as good. All right, last step before we put this in the oven. You may recall we had a little bit of butter left in our pan, and maybe you didn't notice, but we're just going to pour it over the top. Just drizzle it really so that it goes right into those cuts. And if you have a little extra, just scrape it out of here. Don't let any go to waste. And you can even just pour it around the edges. And a little bit more. Okay, now my mother used to put a whole clove in each piece of baklava before she baked it. It's a wonderful little trick to do, but it's also something that if you are not completely crazy about that really strong flavor of cloves, you know, I recommend it, but I don't recommend it. So I'm not going to do it today, but you could try it. You could put it on half of them. It'll be beautiful. Well, now that we've put all the butter on our baklava, we're ready to put it in the oven. So we're going to go ahead and bake it, and we're going to check in about 45 minutes. When it's golden brown, we'll pull it out of the oven, and then we'll add our syrup and let it cool a little, and then give it a try. Well, our Greek baklava is perfect. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? I love the way the phyllo puffed up to form little pillows. It's gorgeous. It really looks lovely. In fact, this method makes me wonder whether you couldn't just lift the whole thing out onto a board. Well, we're not doing that because we have to pour on the syrup. Okay, so we've got our cold syrup, we've got our hot baklava, and we're going to just pour it on, and I'm going to drizzle it. Listen to that. That's a happy pastry. Woo! It's applauding. Okay, this is gorgeous. And oh, by the way, look at how thick it is. It kind of pours out like molasses. And it's okay if you put that cinnamon stick in the middle and some of that lemon peel all around. It just makes it look prettier. Okay. So now we want to take our sharp knife and cut all the way through the layers, all the way to the bottom of the pan while it's still warm, so that the pieces are completely cut through. Okay, we'll do this until we're done. Now, typically, we would allow this to soak in for a couple of hours because we want that syrup to really draw into the entire baklava. I am going to sneak a little tiny piece to give it a taste. I've got a perfect piece right here. Now, it's going to be hot, and this is better served room temperature. As I mentioned before, it's a good idea not to refrigerate it. You can make it several days ahead, let it cool to room temperature, and wrap it in foil. You can even leave it open, but definitely don't refrigerate it because that will start to make it mushy. And here we go. Actually, I think I need a knife to cut through all the layers. Oh, I am so excited. Here we go. That's delicious. Baklava truly is the goddess of Greek pastry. Food for the gods. Delicious flavors of lemon, honey, the crispy flaky pastry, walnuts, cinnamon, a little bit of clove, and just a touch of honey. It's divine. What can I tell you? It's wonderful, and I hope you'll give it a try. It's easy, takes a little time, but worth it, and your friends will love it. I hope you'll try it for one of your holiday get-togethers. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us here at Lucy's Kitchen. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and come back next time when we share more delicious recipes from my kitchen to yours.